Welcome back, everyone. I'm finally back, and today I have a really good one for you. In this video, we're going to be learning how to do CRUD operations in Next.js and MySQL. We're going to be setting up an API endpoint and pulling MySQL data, creating, reading, updating, and deleting data from the database. This concept could be used no matter what kind of database you use, but I'm going to be using MySQL tried and true database, because a lot of people coming from PHP, WordPress want to jump into the React and Next.js world, and the database of choice back then is MySQL, and you could still use it. It's open source, free, and you could set it up on DigitalOcean. I'll tell you, I remember when I first learned about CRUD, when I was first getting into web development, I felt like a god when I could do some CRUD operations, because back then Facebook was just taking off and they had the feed and everything was all about, Instagram was just about data. Because now you could create things like feeds and logins, and everything really relies on data, and you have to interact with the database. And the simple CRUD operations are tried and true and the best thing you can do for your full stack app. If you guys like Next.js, React, CSS, full stack front-end development, hit that like button and subscribe to the channel. Guys, this is going to be a good one, and it's all going to be in one single API. We're going to create one API endpoint called products in our Next.js app and be able to read, write, update, and delete from our API. Now, how we're going to break this down is into 3 stages. One, we're going to be creating a server, an Ubuntu server with MySQL server running and a database. Now, technically, you can use any database you want, but if you want to follow with the tutorial, we're going to be using MySQL. The second stage, we're actually going to be creating an API in Next.js. And thirdly, we're going to be actually writing the functions for CRUD. Let me show you exactly what we're going to be doing here. So here you can see I have a demo of CRUD with Next.js and MySQL. So here I have an API endpoint. So if you go here and hit the refresh, you have JSON coming from, again, this is coming straight from Next.js. It's localhost API products. And here is some JSON that's coming from my database with the data. So that's reading. Here is the reading. Now we're going to be creating. So let's create, I don't know, UGS. I don't know, give me an, guys, how do you spell UGS? Is it like that? I think it's like that. You hit create, you save, and here it is. It automatically gets inputted here. If you refresh, you have UGS. This is so, guys, this was the most exciting thing for me as a web developer ever. Besides getting my first job in web development. But, here we go, create. Now, if you want to update it, now technically you could take this, typically you update items in CRUD using the ID, the unique ID. So let's say we put that here. Let's say we change UGS to, UGS, I don't know, shoes, just for the sake of, it'd be nice if I could spell shoes. Not shoes, but shoes. So we'll hit that, click update. And if you go up here, it's updated right in real time in shoes. Now, if you want to just go ahead and delete that one, we'll take 43, we'll delete it. And now if we go up, it is gone instantly. And I'm going to hit the refresh and we're back to where we are. Now, what's cool about this, and the reason why it's updating instantly, is because we're updating state right after we get the CRUD operation, the database response back. I like to really explain this well, so bear with me. I don't know how long. I'm going to try to keep it short. I mean, as much as I can, but it might be a long one. So just bear with me. Get out your VS Code and get out some tea, some coffee, and let's just get into it now. All right. So let me put away my live demo and let me get into a fresh, I stripped away everything. So I'll have a repo on this, and basically all you need is a place where you can read, and I just literally have these forms, which is just input, save, input, for delete, actually go ahead and create like a fresh Next.js, app, npx create next app with the latest, and then packages. What I've installed is, I just kept the defaults. I only installed 3 extra ones. So Sass, because I love to use Sass. React icons, if you want to. There was one case where I had a trash can in there, so I was using the React icon. And then MySQL too. That's important for MySQL. So go ahead and install that. We're Next.js 13, so I use the source directory by default, but whatever it does, I don't use TypeScript here. I'm pretty scared of TypeScript, so please, Next, just do not make TypeScript by default, just for me, please, because then I just feel like an idiot, when I'm developing. Like, I don't know am I the only guy that doesn't know TypeScript? Listen, I am not going to make anything in my code be more complicated. So anyway, I'm trying to write less code, not more code. So just keep all the defaults. Okay, great. we can put this away. Now, the next step is what we want to do is we need to have a server set up. We need to have a MySQL database. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go inside of my DigitalOcean. And what you can do is just go ahead and create, and you're going to create droplets, and then you're going to choose whatever your region is. I'll use New York, and then I'm going to search for marketplace. So when I search for marketplace, I'm going to search phpMyAdmin. That's going to create a default server with PHP. We don't need PHP, but it's going to have basically the MySQL server and phpMyAdmin, which is a great web GUI client to interact with your database. And that's really important because a lot of stuff nowadays, you could create these servers like at planet scale, but they don't give you a front end interface. So this will have our own database and a front end where we could just easily see the data without going into terminal and updating data that way, just to have some seeded data. Create, the cheapest server, of course, because we are cheap over here. So we'll use I'll use a premium AMD, $7 a month, and I think I'm going to do a video on planet scale versus DigitalOcean droplets, because a lot of people have been trying these cloud-based MySQL servers, but here we actually can create multiple servers. So go ahead and make sure you have your SSH keys there all set. Now, check a tutorial on SSH. You could just create an SSH key. In DigitalOcean, you just upload the public key. And you just choose, because then we're going to terminal. We're going to have to be making some, changes to the terminal, to the database, just to make sure it's all running. So I'll have that all set. That's about it. I'll call it MySQL Crud for now. All right. Let's create the droplet. Now that'll take some time to run. But what we're going to do is I'm going to SSH into this just to make sure I have access and everything is right. All right, we're in. So all I did was SSH into the root. Now all we're going to look at is right here. So what they're saying is, here's my phpMyAdmin. The reason why we installed phpMyAdmin, so we don't have to do things through the terminal. You can do things through the terminal by connecting in using MySQL Workbench and things like that, but we'll keep it easy right off the web. So we'll go, all right, so it's telling us we have our phpMyAdmin. It gives us, the straight URL and everything. You could add SSL and all that stuff later, but it gives you the login right here. So let me save that on the side. Save your own, and let's plug this in right here, and let's log in. All right, so this is cool. So we're logged into phpMyAdmin, and we're just gonna create a simple database, right? So new, we're gonna create one called products. Just click create, and we're just going to create let's just make another table called products, because the whole database is called products. We can call it whatever you want. And now we need a table called products. We're going to store the records, and we'll just make 2 columns. So first we're going to make one called product ID. We're going to leave it as integer. We're going to make it primary, and should auto increment. So that ID, every time a record is inserted, this is not a tutorial on MySQL, but it'll just basically auto increment the ID. Now we'll make product name, and we'll call the varchar, and we'll say 250. All right. And we'll just say, that can't be null, or it doesn't matter. We'll leave it like that just so we don't see too many errors. All right. So we have, just for the sake of the tutorial, product ID, product name, we'll save. And that's it. Okay, so we're good. That's all we need so far from that. Now, the other thing is, in Next.js, the one thing we have to do is create another user in the terminal and make sure that we can connect to this database. Because when you create one in DigitalOcean, it's secured. Now we want to allow a user to access this. So let's go ahead and do that. All right, so we're in our server. We're going to go MySQL, and then we need to enter that database. The password's it's right here. And we're going to paste that. Click enter. So now we're inside of MySQL. We already have, now we could have created our database here, but it's just, I don't really love to do that. That's why I use the phpMyAdmin, but now we just want to create a user. I'm just going to call it Omar, and I'm going to use the same, password that was there. And I'll have these in, some sort of gist somewhere. So we're just going to create a user called Omar at localhost, identified by the password that I already got. Great. Now we're also going to do another one. We're just going to open up this user to be able to access anything. All right. So we'll save that, and I'll have these. We're just literally creating a user that can access the database. And now we're saying granting Omar onto all, everything that's happening on the database. And I'll put this again in a gist. Now we should be okay, and I should be able to connect inside of Next on our product database. So now let's close out of this for now, hoping we did all this correct. And we have a user called Omar, and we have a password, and you'll do the same. Now let's get back into our Next.js project. I have some default stuff here that I'm going to sort of move around and play with. All right. So now if everything was correct, what we want to do is we want to go inside of our local host, our .env file, and just to make sure we can connect, we want to save our MySQL host. So now make sure you have your IP address from DigitalOcean along with all the database username and all that stuff. So my host is going to be, MySQL host is the IP address. The database, we called it products. The user, I called him Omar. The password, I just took what's there by default, and we just made our user called password, hoping in this one we don't need this for something else. And your next public URL, just make it whatever yours is, private localhost 3000. I just added a port to it, so 3001 for me. That should be okay. So let's save this. Now, first step is we want to, let me close out my phone, keep getting these beeps. We want to create the API endpoint. So now we're creating an API so that API pulls our data and where we can interact. So actually this is a nice tutorial on actually how to create an API. So let's create, the first thing is we want to do is we want to create a function that is going to connect to our database. All right, so I think I'll have this in a gist as well. This is just a function that is basically connecting, okay? This is all fresh. So it's basically connecting to, this is how we connect to a MySQL database, and it wraps it in a library so that basically when we're in our function, we don't have to rewrite this every single time. Now we want to go into the pages API folder. We want to create an API endpoint. So Next creates one called hello, right? So if we go to the one called hello API, hello. So there's a generic API, right? Just says John Doe. I wish they would change the John Doe, because John Doe for some reason reminds me of like death for some reason, but I don't know why it's there. Now I'm gonna save this as one called products. So let's save as. I'm just gonna copy just so I can have this stuff, products. What we're gonna do is we're gonna import, hopefully we don't have any problems, the library, where export the function called query that is connecting to the database. And in our API, we're going to import that. Let me get rid of that. Import, and this is a new thing in Next.js where it's just the root. So in the CRUD, there's going to be 4 functions. Get, the methods, HTTP protocols that tell it which to do. So get, there's post, put, and delete. So those are going to be all API endpoints. Whatever comes in, it's going to be rec.method. So basically we want to say, if the rec.method, which is going to come from technically from another page, but for now we just want to get the default data. I want to write one query to read the data first. If the rec.method is get, let's go ahead and let's put this here. Now, by default, it'll be rec.method. If we just refresh the page, that's just like a generic thing. Oh, let me actually go to my products. Okay, I'm in the wrong. Okay, good. So we're actually in the products. Good. So one thing about Safari is you can't see the URL. Okay, now we want to do a query. We want to query the database. To query the database, this is basically in Node using Next.js. We're going to do const products await query, and then we're going to write the query. So we're going to say boom, query is going to be this, and then the values we don't need, it's going to be empty, but values are going to be some parameters that you would pass along, which are going to be empty. And again, this is just the function that we're using. All right, so hoping we don't have an error here. Oh, I wrote await. Let's write awaits. All right, and we have to make this async if we're going to be using await. Async function. Right, function. What I got? Export default. What am I doing? Async. Async. Okay, good. All right, so cool. So now we're saying if it's a method, if it's get, let's run a query. Now here's where we write SQL. Not a tutorial on SQL, but again, it's very simple for these inserts, updates, deletes. They're just one-liners, and it's just SQL language. So we just want to select data from our database. So just for now, we just want to select, everything, which is an asterisk, and we're going to say from the products table. And we're gonna save, and let's refresh just to make sure we don't have an error. I am super excited. So just the fact that that means it's actually calling the database, it's not throwing an error. That means this is executing properly. Now, instead of outputting our JSON John Doe, we want to output products and our products object that came from the database, which is this, and that should be a list of, that should be all of the stuff from the database. Now when we hit refresh, okay, this is great. This means that everything's working, but remember our database is actually empty. Okay, so because if we go, we'll actually try to log in right now. So if we go here to HTTP, our IP, we go to phpMyAdmin, again, just a way to access that, and we'll go to the default login that we had, and we click save, and we go here, databases, products table, there's nothing here. Now, if I were to insert, I'll do it now just to show you. We don't need to do anything there. We'll just say Nike shoes. Save. Hit refresh. Great. So now we actually have an API endpoint listening. Inside of our next app, we have an API where we can actually give to others. We can read from it in our database. And that's great. Now what we want to do is we want to read that on our page, and then we want to be able to create, delete, and update data right from our app. Okay. So let's continue. So I'm just going to go ahead and delete that for now. Now, we won't cover obviously like in terms of security and API keys, and for right now this is open. There's more sophisticated ways of sort of like locking the core, but generally if your web app needs to access an API endpoint, it's generally going to be public public API. So without convoluting the tutorial, I'm going to keep it very simple. We're literally just going to be reading. We're not going to be focusing too much on all these security protocols and if and conditions. Let's just get the CRUD operations. All right, so we should be okay. I don't think we need this now, but let's hit a refresh. Products are empty again. Now let's go back to our application. Oops, nope. I just displayed my whole password, but I don't care. This password is, cracks me up sometimes when YouTubers like display passwords. Like, oh my God, I want no one to see it. I mean, this is really just for the tutorial. You think I'm really gonna be doing anything with that database? I could care less. It's really just for you guys, So you should get the password. All right, so let's go to localhost. All right, so here's, again, we have my boilerplate stuff. I didn't want to spend time on CSS doing this. This is all ready, just empty forms. Now, first thing we want to do is, so this actually goes to that, okay? So this is good. Localhost 3000 API products. Okay, great. I don't know why that one's different color. Let me make sure I have the right 3001. Yeah. All right, so I have the link here just so we can see. Now, the first we want to read from this database. Okay, let's go in here. Now, let's get going because now's the nitty gritty. Now we want to go back in. I'll close this. We don't really need to do anything right now with our products endpoint. That's all done. Let's go in our index file, our index.js file. And let me see if let me try to zoom in a little bit. Okay, so I have some stuff here that was already created from before, just so I didn't throw any errors. Now, what you want to do is, for the sake of the tutorial, I have some refs. So you want to have import useEffect, useState, and useRef. And you want to have a ref for each of these fields. This one, these two, and this one. So I have one called product name ref. That's going to be for this one. Product ID to delete. That's going to be this last one. That's because we need to reference what's entered there. And then product ID to update, product name to update. Those are just ways to reference those fields. That's all. So just go ahead and make those default refs. Then I have some default state. I didn't want to waste too much time on this because they were going to throw in errors. We want to have state on const products, set products, use state. We're going to be updating the products. That's going to be the products that come back from the API, but we need them in state as well. So we're just going to create some empty state in an array, empty array. Then we're going to create some default functions that say, was it updated or was there an error? Did we create or was it an error? Did we delete or was there an error? And so on and so forth. So, you might not need this. You don't really fully need the deleted one. It does for extra measure. I want to show you how to do it. But for now, just create these const update set updated, const create set created. I'll move these actually up here. And then these are For extra measure, if there's an error, we can show an error that came. And then I have some default functions, async functions to add product, get products, delete products, update products, and an empty use effect, right? So just some boilerplate stuff. Now, you could probably make this sophisticated with all one function and then, put in parameter. Are you trying to create? Are you trying to delete? But I want it to be very clear. I want to separate each thing just so it's really, really clear. Okay. So the first thing we're going to do is, let's move this up. We're going to be getting the products. So we're going to read from our database. So let's go down right here. And what we want to do here is on use effects. Now, Next is going through a transition in Next 13 where they're going to be not using get static props. So I didn't want to use get static props because that's going to be going away. It's going to be fetch, and it's still sort of in somewhat of beta mode, I believe. So for now, I'm just going to be using fetch, but just with plain old React on the use effect mount. So on the use effect mount, let's go ahead and do get products. So once use effect hits, I want to do get products. And now if we refresh here, all right, nothing's happening because nothing happened and we don't have nothing happening here. So now we're going to write the function, our fetch, to go ahead and get the data. So first we'll write an object that's going to tell us the method. So I just label it const post data method get headers application JSON is what you want to send in the headers. Now this is just an object that we have to send inside of our fetch. So we're just going to do plain old, what's known as, very simple const res equals awaits fetch, and we're going to fetch the API endpoint. So I saved it. It's called process.env and then next. Okay, so I already have that in my env file. So, you always have to, whenever you fetch or do things into an API endpoint, it has to be the full absolute URL path. So when you're going to post this, when you're going to push this into production, you don't want to necessarily write it out because that will change. So you want to put it in an env file and an env variable. So I have it here as localhost. API products, that's where we're going to be getting our data from. And then we're also going to be passing along inside of our fetch, our object post data. Okay, because we want to tell it it's a get function. And then we're going to do res, we're going to wait for it. I'll move this over here. Actually, I'll move this back. All right, now whatever comes back, what should come back, let's go here and let's go inside of what we're sending back into our products. We're sending back products, a products object with the products, an array of objects. So our response, again, I'm not going to make this sophisticated on how to really handle if it comes back as an error. I just want to keep it plain old simple. Expecting data is going to be there. So if data gets there, it's going to be let's console log this, whatever comes back, just so we can see console log response dot products. All right, so let's inspect. Right, so let's just make sure this is the right thing that's executing. Yeah. So if we click here, test, so it's an empty array. So it's pulling this empty array, which is really what's happening. Let me just get rid of this out of the way. Okay. All right. So this is good. So now what we want to do is we want to put the response into the state. So we're going to say set products response dot products, right? All right, great. All right, so now if we read this, let's close this. We want to be able to read the state right on the page. Of course, there's nothing there. So you know what? Let's go ahead and let's put some data, because I want to know if we're reading this before we start creating, the create operation. I want to just show you the read. So let's insert Nike shoes and then let's insert. Again, we're going to be doing this. We're going to be creating function, but just to make it, to seed this, let's just make sure we have this Air Jordan. Great. Oh, Air Jordan. Save. Great. Let's refresh our API endpoint, and now we have two shoes here. Now, if we refresh, okay, we should have the data in our state. So now let's read this data. All right. So let's go, and we're just going to map over our products. So let's go inside of here, and let's say products.map products have an index. We'll do, all right, and then return. And what we'll do, I have some stuff here and some styles. So what I'll do is I'm just going to kind of copy and paste some items that I have here on the side, just because I use Sass a lot. So I have a class name product that's going to kind of just make it nice, put some span, and then what we're doing is taking, I called it product here, so I have to change this item. Okay, so basically, well, actually, let's hold off on this trash can one. So we're gonna save this. Oh, can't find variable item. I must have it somewhere else over here. Okay, whoops. Oh man, hold on. All right, so let's say product. All right, great. Now if we hit refresh, look at that. Now I actually, I have some like CSS that's locking it. So let's actually get rid of that CSS that's locking the height. All right, so let's get rid of this height. All right, so now we're reading this, right? So this is great. So this is pretty simple. A lot of people already know how to read from JSON data, but we're reading, what's cool is we're reading from our own API. We created our own API and we're reading from our API, which is great. And we could technically give that API to someone else. Let's say we had some cool app, we can actually have some other developer read our API into their app. Okay, so Nike shoes, Air Jordans, great. Simple enough. All right, that's great. Is there anything else to cover about reading? I mean, that's pretty simple. Reading the data, we're done. All right. Just make sure when you read, you're in a loop, you add the key and make sure it's unique. So I'm passing the product ID. So just make sure you use that. You could probably use the index as well, but I think that can throw some errors if you're doing any kind of reordering. So just use the master ID. Okay, so that's done. So now we have our function that reads our API endpoint. Now let's create a create API so that we can insert data from our app. Okay, let's close out of this. So we have our API here. Now we want to write something that says if the method, now we get to the fun stuff. If the rec.method is post, it's really get, post, put, delete. You want to make sure you're using those. Basically, if it's post, it will do this instead of doing the get. If it's post, we want to insert, so we'll do that. And we could just copy this over, and just maybe I'll put let product just to make sure that there's something always there. All right, okay, so if the rec is post, we want to do this. Now what we want to do here is we want to write in SQL, and you could basically copy and paste this, the const, because we just need to write a new query. It's almost the same thing. All we're doing is writing an insert query. And you could even Google that if you ever get stuck with SQL. You could always say SQL insert, statement, and you'll get a bunch of sample. Sometimes I forget the syntax of it, and here's a sample insert into, which is the table, the columns, and the values. All right, so I'll delete that because I have this pretty memorized. I've been using SQL for a really long time, but it's a one-liner. You don't really need MongoDB. You don't really need to do anything different from what you've been doing as a web developer. MySQL works really, really well. So we'll copy and paste this query. I'll change the name to const add product. And what we're going to do is we're going to write an SQL insert statement, which is basically insert into product name, and then the values, which Now the values is going to be an argument that's coming in, and now you could just use the question mark. That's going to be posted. And then what we want it to be is a const product name, right? Because if we go back to here, we're just going to write the product name. The product ID, remember, is an auto increment value. So we're going to do that. So we're going to go in here and we're going to say const product name equals rec.body. It should be passed in the body, and I'll show you how to do that. Rec.body product name. That's what I'm going to call it. Now I have to remember that that's what it's called, and we have to add that as a value. And then if you have more, you will just put a comma, add more, and it'll go in order of the question marks. Okay, but for now we're only inserting one. And then we're going to say if, now generally what happens is when you insert directly into MySQL, you're going to have a new ID. Now, to get that new ID, because it's instantly added, there is a property called insert ID. So what you're going to do is say if add products dot insert ID, right? That means it was successful. Then let's write the message equals success. And then let's have a let message by default up here just to make sure it's there. And then we'll say else. Sorry, actually this should be equals. A message can just say error. All right. Now it'll be successful for our purposes for now. And what we'll do is we'll say, let's create a new object of the product and let's pass it in for what comes out, because we want to send that ID back over, the new one. So let's create a new, let's actually create one called, so we'll need the let, whatever, we'll just do it from here. Let product equal the product ID, and then add products.insert ID. That's what came in, right? That's from this object that came back. And then the product name, which is really just this because that's what was sent over. And we're actually just resending that. So we're going to say products. And then here in the res, what we're going to do is we're going to send back a response message. So we'll just change the object a bit here. And we're going to put here another object called message and then the product. We just want to know a message. Was it successful or was there an error? That just helps for that. But I'm going to keep it simple. We'll just use the success. So now let's go back in here. And now let's write the function to send. So now we actually have our API should be able to read. Now, of course, you eventually, again, this is not a tutorial on security. You should have like some sort of API key or that you're passing just to make sure that no one can just post into your API and things like that. If there's some sort of secret, right? But that's beyond the scope of this tutorial. But that's, can be pretty simple where there's some authorization. You'll pass like an API key inside of the authorization object in the header. But for now, what we're going to do is async add the product. So let's go back to our app and let's go ahead, and we need to have a function that's going to send over the data. All right, so let's go back here and let's say we want to say on click, we want to be able to send this and execute the add product function, which we haven't created yet. So, but let's go into our update button. Oh, it's there already. So on click, we're just going to say add product. And on click, we're going to run with this. Okay, so let's write our function. So we're going to, again, write the post data, right, by default. A lot of times I just copy and paste this. So let's copy and paste our post data. But instead of method get, we're sending post. We're going to leave the application. Now we want to write a body. In get, you can't send body. In post, put and delete, we could send the body property. So we're going to do that. And we're going to send it as JSON.stringify. And now we're going to pass an object. We're going to say product name is this. You can name this whatever you want. I'm just keeping it similar to our database. Now there are some rules where it doesn't need to be. I'll get to that in a second. But let's write product name. Now this should actually come from the value of this guy, right? So we have that value already in a ref, right? I told you before to make a ref. I'm just going to rewrite it, say product name. So product name ref.current.value. I'm trimming in case I'm going to leave some extra spaces. I just want to have this here. So that's the value I want to send over as a product name. Now, as for the property name, you could change it to whatever you want. I sometimes make it similar to the database. Now there are some rules of database where you don't want people to know exactly how your columns are labeled and things like that. But just to keep it simple, I just don't want to forget. So I'm leaving it as the same name. Okay, so we're going to post that in. And we're just going to write, again, I'm just going to copy this over because we've done this many times. And what you could do also, you could write a little simple, I don't want people submitting like just empty values. So if the product name .length is less than 3, just return, don't do anything, just so people don't like click the button. And you could get really sophisticated with that as well. You could have some messages and things like that, but just keep it simple. And now what we can do is say, we want to write the function to send that over, okay? We're just writing a fetch. Again, same fetch as the one in get. We're sending a response. And now we're saying if, I'm going to write here a message, if the response.response message does not equal success, just return. And you can make this fancy. What I'm expecting is a success message. And then now for the data, you could write, after that's done, you could write set created true. So that was I just want to know that this came back. This was my old state that I just set here for created, meaning it was created. And let's set it to true. And then down here, I write a little ternary statement that says, if it's created, go ahead and write success, just so I can see on screen that it was created. So let's hit a refresh. Hopefully we did this okay. And let's this time write UGS. So we wrote UGS and we want to save this. Yes. Okay, now let's go to our API and let's hit refresh. And we did it. Now this is great. So we actually, now if we go into our PHPMyAdmin, let's actually go here and let's browse. And you could see here that it's added. So this we created from our app. We didn't do it inside PHPMyAdmin. We didn't have to do anything. We actually wrote a create function into our API. So that's wonderful. I'm glad that didn't come out with any errors. It's nice to see something go smooth in a tutorial. Now, we definitely added the data. The one thing is you don't see it on the page because we didn't update state. Now that's a little more complicated, but I'll show you how to do that quickly. You want to update your state and add the new product to the state just so you can see it updated. It definitely went in, but you want to be able to post on your page that it's done. So what we'll do here is, if you remember, we'll go back to our add product. If you remember back here, we actually sent our product all the details back. I want to send it back to the front end so that we can read it. So what we'll say here is, I'll get rid of this products and we'll say, oh no, that's the wrong one. Let's go to our add product function. And we'll say, create the new product based on response.response.product, right? And now we have the new product inside of a variable, right? That came back. Now we want to update our product state that we had created earlier. And that's a little more, Dan Abramov has a really, you got to read the beta React docs. He has a really good explanation on how to like update like arrays of objects inside of state and like insert and deleting them. It's really important because you don't want to rewrite completely over the state, but you have to rewrite the state, but like in a new variable. So what we'll do here is we'll set products. This is how we do it. We're going to set products to whatever was there. The insert's a little more easy because you're just adding to the end. Keeping whatever was there, adding this new item, which is basically the new product.product ID, product name. I'm just mimicking what was already in my state, right? I'm mimicking how I have my data showing on the page. It has to match, right? And we had here product ID, product name. So if we click save, let's hit I hit save and the state already got updated. So you can see here. So now if I do a new one, new shoe, we'll click save. Now it inserted into the database and now my state got updated automatically. So that's wonderful, right? So now we created data, we posted it, and we have it in our state. Now I used to not know how to do this part, which is really important because you want your front end to instantly be able to reflect the changes that happened in the database without like recalling the database because you already did it. You already called it once. Great. We're done with create. We have 2 more to go. So you guys take a break. Woo, I gotta breathe. Now we want to be able to, should I show you delete or update next? Let's do our update for now, okay? Now, how do we update the data? Now, technically, on a front end, to keep it easy, you have to plug in the ID and make the change. But technically, usually you're going to have like some sort of front end where you can see the item like here. there's an edit button that takes you to another page, and then you redisplay the data, and then the product ID should be pre-populated already as if you're on the page, right? But I didn't want to go through all that. I just wanted to show you the function. So I'm going to manually write the product ID I want to get updated. Obviously, that's not the way, for the sake of the tutorial, that's what I want to show you. All right. So now let's create a new API endpoint, right? So now we're adding to our API. We have an API that reads, we have an API to input that we can technically, if we had an API key, we could also allow other developers to go ahead and insert into our database. Let me just make sure, yeah, I'm still recording. Wow, I'm 45 minutes in. I'm gonna have a lot of editing to do here. And then, all right, so what we wanna do is now we wanna write another function. If rec.method, let me go up here, equals put, right? That's the protocol for editing a resource. We're going to say, I'm going to go ahead and copy over, my res JSON already. We're going to send the same information, res, response, message, product. I'll get back to that in a second, right? We're gonna edit this in a second. So now what we want to do is we want to be able to say, I'm gonna have to send over an ID, right? So what happens is in my ID, I'm gonna have to say, search for the ID, find that ID, and then edit the product name based on that ID. So I'll have to send over one of these IDs because these are always going to be unique, and then edit the name. So now we're going to say that's all in one function. It's an update. It's an SQL query statement. It's an update statement. So let's go ahead and copy over again our const. We already have the query, so we're going to say update product. And instead of insert into, we have our update statement. So we're going to say update. Well, let's just clean this out. And let's make sure first that we have these being sent over. We're going to have to send over the ID and the product name, the new one, from our front end. So we'll put it into another body, object, which we'll do in the next step. Right now, I just made a product ID from recBody.productID, and these will be named in the next section, which we'll do. So we want to say look for our, so we're going to say update products. This is a simple SQL query. Update product, set product name. Now that is the column in the database, right? That's these guys. So it's called product name. Set the product name equal to the argument that's passed, where you always got to make sure you add the where clause, because if you don't, it's going to update every single, I made this mistake before. Not in production, where I left out the where clause, and it'll update every product name in your entire database to whatever weird name you put. So we'll put where the product ID equals whatever argument is passed. So now we're going to say the values for the first question mark is product ID. Oh, no, actually for the first one is product name. So you got to make sure you have these in order. And then it's product ID. So update that where that is. All right, great. Then when SQL is updated, it sends over a property called affected rows. How do you know that this was updated? There's another field property called affected rows. So we're going to say put the result of that. Const result equals update product dot affected rows. That's going to have like, was a row changed? And it'll typically just have a Boolean value of 1 or 0. So it'll be result. So we'll say if the result, right, is there, message is success, otherwise message is error, pass the message here. We'll rewrite also the product again object based on what we have came in. So we'll say const product is going to be the ID we already have because we passed it. A product name we want to use from here what was sent over, because that's going to have the new value anyway that the user typed in the field. And we'll say send over the product. So we should be okay. All right, so let's go ahead and try to check this. Let's go back here and let's write our function to update the product. So let's actually move this over down below. All right, cool. We're almost there, guys. Okay, so now let's write our update product. So the first thing we want to do is, what do you want to do? We want to make sure we get the values of those refs. So I already told you early on, we created some refs in these two areas, product ID to update, product name. Then when someone submits the update product, we're saying make a new product ID to update, pull that information, a value, product name to update, get it from the ref and the value. So you have the values. Okay. Then what we want to do again, I'm going to say if the product ID to update is 0, don't do nothing. If someone's just hitting submit and there's nothing, there's no ID, just leave it alone. It's just for fun, because I notice sometimes I like to click buttons. Sometimes we'll have clients to click buttons and just say, what's wrong with this? So we just make sure we can't just update anything. So now we'll put the const, the post data, right? Which we already can copy and paste, kind of like what we have here. So we'll const, we'll copy and paste. Usually it's all the same information. Post data method is not going to be post, it's going to be put. Headers are fine. Body, we want to go ahead and pass the new information, right? The update fields. So we're going to pass over the product ID, product name. Again, these you can name whatever you want, as long as inside of your API, when you're requesting it here, you get the right rec body dot whatever you actually put. I'm just keeping it similar to my database for now. So we're going to send over a body product ID and the product name to update. Now we're going to actually just write our fetch again. So we're going to just, this is pretty much boilerplate fetch response call. All right, we're sending it over to the products page, post data, waiting for the response. And again, we're going to say if the response, we could say the same thing. We're just going to actually, you know what, instead of the error, I'll just take this. So we're saying if the response is not success, just don't do anything. Again, you could make that sophisticated, but for the sake of this. And then I'll say set updated to true, right? So we want to have a response that this got updated. Now, what we want to do is, okay, let's just see if this was done. And then let's go ahead and create updated. Let me get my, so again, I wrote a ternary function here, updated, and then I write success and all that. So let's go here and let's save this. Okay, so let's choose one of these. So instead of new shoe, I'm gonna write new shoes, right? So let's go here, let's refresh, new shoe. Let's choose product ID 5 and let's write new shoes. Yes, it worked. Now the state didn't update because I didn't write a function yet to update my state instantly. But if we hit a refresh on our API endpoint, we've changed this and now it says new shoes. Now we've updated. We actually updated our database, our API endpoint, and we're all good. Now the function to actually update state is a little more complicated, but I'll show you that as well, because this is really important to be able to update your UI with the new information. So what we'll do here is I'm going to show you how to do this. We'll copy. I have this written on the side here, not to waste too much time because we're already almost an hour in. So what we'll do here is set updated, and we will say, we want to say get the product ID that was passed, get the product name that was passed. Now we're going to map over our state. We're going to create a new variable as we map over our state. And we're going to write a function that says, wherever you find that ID, replace it with this and keep everything else the same. That's what's happening. So we're mapping over and we're saying, if the product ID is, dot product ID equals this guy that came in from our API, or the one that was submitted because we know it's the same ID, then I'm writing a new object that says rewrite that product ID, which is product updated, and sending over whatever was there. You could rewrite this, but I'm just getting over if there's any other functions, and we're just, because nothing else is changing except the product name. So we're just keeping everything the same and saying product name, change it to the new one that came in from the API, right? And that guy came in from here, right? When it got updated, it's being sent over here. So we'll save here. And we're saying go ahead and return that. Otherwise, just return all the other products. And then we have to set our products to this new value, this new variable, right? Some people try to go in and try to update the product. You can't mutate the state. You have to actually rewrite the state. That's, from Dan Abramov from the beta React documentation. Check that out. So we're gonna say set the products to this new guy. Now, if you go back here, it already, I love that it just updates in real time. I didn't even do anything, and it just updated. Now let's do this again. Let's change it to new shoe. And you'll see it change in real time. New shoe update. Look, it got updated already. If I hit a refresh, it went back to new shoe. That's it. So now we're on our last endpoint. We want to create an API endpoint to allow the deleting of records. Now this one, obviously you want to have security measures involved because you don't want to be able to anyone to just post an ID, right? You do need to have API keys and that kind of thing involved. But I just want to show you in a simple way how this can be done. All right, now let's go back to our API and let's write one to delete the product. So let's go back to our API products and let's write one to delete it. All right, so we're gonna say if the rec.method equals delete, then let's do something different. This one's a little more simpler. We're gonna say we'll have to send over the ID, right, from the front end, rec.body.product ID. We'll copy over this guy, just copy over this, and then we'll just rewrite the statement. So we'll say delete products or delete product. And it's pretty easy. It's going to be delete. You could search the SQL statements, delete from products table, where, again, you gotta have your where clause or else you're gonna delete every single record, equals the argument, and then we're gonna say where the product ID is what has to get sent over. All right, so we're gonna delete that wherever the product ID comes over. Again, in this case, generally you won't be wanting to execute deletion unless there's a login, you're checking for the cookie, you're making sure that there's something associated with the user in the database. So there's another measure you need to do if you're in production to make sure that before you get to the delete statement, you're checking cookies, you're making sure that the person is allowed to do this this function. All right, so then we're gonna say if there was a result, it's the same thing. If it got affected, it'll be result equals delete product dot affected row. So that'll be a Boolean value of 1 if it did do it. Same thing we'll say if the result is true, then message equals success and that kind of thing. And in this case, we don't really need to pass the product at all. We just want to probably send maybe the ID back over because we do want to have the ID because we want to be able to update our state and remove it from our state. So we'll just say res.status 200, we're going to send over response, message, success, and the product ID, we want to send it back to the front end. All right, so we're going to go back to our index and now let's write the delete product function. Now down here I have a button that's once it's submitted, product ID, click delete, and it's going to execute the delete product. Now you want to send over the product ID, you want to have a ref for the product ID to delete, and I'm sending over, right in the delete product, I'm sending over as an argument that value that goes in. Now again, you generally don't want to be doing that. You're going to be having like a trash icon, and I'll show you how to do that. But for now, let's just do this. So we're going to delete the product, and now let's go back into our index page, and let's write our function to delete the product. All right, great. So now we're going to pass the argument ID. And now we're going to say, if there's no ID, just return, don't do anything, just for the sake of people hitting the submit button. Now we'll we'll just write this over right here. Our post, it's the same as before. Our method is delete. Our headers are the same. Our body, we're passing over the ID that came in the argument that we want to send over to delete, right? That's what we're going to do. And then we're going to do the same thing, the same function. We're just going to do a fetch. Sending over to our same API endpoint. So we have one endpoint that's going to do all this stuff. And now we're going to say same thing if the response is, if the message, let's go back up here and let's just say if the message is, let's copy and paste what we have up here. So we're going to write if the message doesn't equal success, hit a return. And now we're going to say set deleted equals true, right? So now we just want to have a little state that tells us we're all good, everything came back okay, so we can inform our front end. Again, let's go ahead and delete that. let's test this out. So let's hit a refresh. Let's go to number 5 and let's delete the new shoe. So let's write 5, delete, success. Again, didn't update here. We didn't update the state yet, but if we hit a refresh, it's gone. And if we go to our database, I never showed this at all already last time, but yeah, it's already gone. I'm hitting refresh. So you can see it matches up to what we have in our API endpoint. Now we want to be able to update state. So now we need to be able to delete the item off the array in the state, that array in the state. So now let's do it this way. So what we're going to do, go back here. So when this response is back, we want to say, which ID do we need to remove from the state? So I'm just writing one that says const ID to remove equals. Now, sometimes the JSON endpoint sends over a string. So I want to make sure that we're referencing the ID as a number. So I'm going to use parse float response.response.product ID because that's what we're sending back. We're just sending back the ID. So now I have the ID, which I already kind of technically had, but I'm just getting it back from the response. You always like to use whatever came back because you want to make sure that everything was done. You don't want to use what was on the front end in case something really went wrong. You want to make sure everything got executed. So we're using what came back from the API. Now what we want to do is we want to filter our state and rewrite over the state with just getting rid of that. And that'll be, we're setting the products, we're just doing a filter, we're refiltering this product saying if that product, if any item in the array, like search for the product ID, find that one and just delete it and just return back the products with the same thing, just without that guy, right? So we'll go ahead and save, and I think it probably already went away because the state, yeah, it's there. I'll add a new one for now just to show you, new shoes, and then we'll delete it. Got saved. I'll just hit a refresh for now, just to refresh the state, hit a refresh. So we have number 6. Now let's go here and let's delete number 6. Let's delete, success, go up, it's gone. So our state got updated. That's cool, that's pretty much it. Now for a quick bonus, I wanna show you how to actually add a trash can right in there to delete it instantly. So we're gonna run the same execution, but we're just gonna go ahead and add a trash can. That's where I use React icons so that I can just have like a trash can, because I'm tired of asking designers for all these assets we need. So let's go up here. All right, so I'm gonna actually go into our mapping and I'm gonna add right here a trash can. Now this is from React icons. You could use anything you want. And all I'm gonna say is on click, I'm gonna say the same thing. Just go ahead and delete the product, and I need to pass the ID as the argument. Now, since this is being mapped over, we have the product ID right there. It's gonna be product.product ID. I had it as item in another tutorial I was doing that I was writing. So on click, delete the product, send the product ID over. Now we'll hit a, oh, something went wrong here. Can't find, oh, I have to import that. Finally, some error. I feel normal again because I usually get thousands of errors when I'm writing this. So you have to import the, there we are. So we have this trash can. You can search React icons, an amazing package with a lot of cool icons to use. And here we are. So when we click, this should get deleted. And let's go back here. Where are we? Yep. Right here. And that's typically where you would want to delete. Now you might want to have a warning before you let the person delete. So you might have on another state and double check it. But for the sake of the tutorial, let's just make sure this works. Boom. Woo! Set a refresh, it's gone. Refresh, gone. We'll leave that last one. Now if you go back into our browse, into our phpMyAdmin, now this is our database, our live database, and all we have is Nike shoes. That's it, guys. This was really, really long, but I think it was really, 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 really important. This is CRUD, guys. This is create, read, update, delete, everything you need to be a full stack developer. Reading data, updating. Now, of course, all this, make it sophisticated, as fancy as you want. Just go ahead and use, I just want to show you how to, now you implement this into your full stack app wherever you need. And that's it. Guys, hit that like button. All right. Love you guys. See you guys in the next one. Peace.